One night changed everything. I was in the kitchen making dinner for my younger siblings. It had been a long, exhausting day, and I was rushing to finish before my parents got home. The kitchen was tiny, just enough room for the stove, a few pots, and the table where we ate together as a family. As I cooked, I noticed a faint hissing sound coming from the gas stove. At first I brushed it off, assuming it was just the usual noise from the burner. But when I bent down to check the connection, everything erupted. A sudden explosion ripped through the room. The blast hurled me into the wall. Flames burst out all around me, and the heat was suffocating. My clothes caught fire. I could feel my skin burning. I opened my mouth to scream, but the smoke rushed in, choking me. The last thing I remember was collapsing to the floor, engulfed in flames, thinking, "This is it. I'm going to die." And then I woke up, but I wasn't in my body anymore. It's hard to explain, but I found myself in an endless, pitch-black void. A crushing fear came over me. I felt completely abandoned. The silence was deafening, broken only by my own cries. The darkness was so heavy, it felt like it was swallowing me whole. Suddenly the ground gave way and I started falling, down into what felt like a pit of fire. The heat, the flames, they were worse than anything I'd felt in the kitchen. Screams filled the air, horrifying, desperate wails, but I couldn't see anyone around me. The terror and pain were overwhelming. I cried out, begging for help. At first I called on Allah, "Allah, save me!" I screamed it again and again, but there was no answer. Just silence. Crushing, endless silence. I was completely alone. Panic set in. Why wasn't anyone hearing me? Why weren't my prayers being answered? Was this my punishment? Was I meant to stay here forever? This isn't just a story, this is my story. My name is Fatima, and I want to share the moment that changed my life. It's not fiction, it's a journey. From the deepest darkness to a light I never expected. From hopelessness to the greatest peace I've ever known. I grew up in a small village in North Africa. Life was simple, and for my family, faith was everything. In our home, Islam wasn't just a religion, it was our identity. Every morning started with prayer, and every decision was shaped by what we believed. As the oldest daughter of 5, I carried a lot of weight. My father often told me I was the backbone of our household. My mother relied on me to take care of my siblings. I tried hard to be the kind of daughter that made them proud, obedient, kind, and faithful. From a young age, I loved reciting the Quran. I found beauty in the words and took pride in memorizing them. My dream was to someday travel to Mecca with my parents, to fulfill one of our most sacred duties. But even with all my devotion, there was always this emptiness inside. I couldn't explain it, but during prayer, it felt like my words were just floating, like they weren't being heard. I didn't feel the closeness to Allah that others talked about. I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't spiritual enough. So I tried harder. I prayed more. I fasted more. I constantly sought forgiveness. But deep inside, that void remained. Still, I stayed silent. I didn't dare question the faith that had shaped my life. Then came that night, back in the kitchen, preparing dinner, trying to get everything done before my parents got home. The small space, the hissing stove, the sudden blast, the fire, the pain, and then darkness. I remember thinking, this is how it ends. And then I was in that void again, lost, alone, surrounded by nothing but fear and silence. The ground gave way beneath me and I fell into fire. Not like the kitchen fire, this was far worse. Searing heat wrapped around me. I could hear terrible screams, but no one was in sight. I kept shouting, "Allah, save me," again and again, but nothing, no answer, just emptiness. The silence pressed in harder than the flames. I felt hopeless, like I had been completely forgotten, condemned to suffer. Then, through the chaos, a light appeared. At first, just a faint glow, but it grew, brighter and brighter until it filled the space. The darkness and heat began to vanish, and standing in that light was a man, dressed in white. His face radiated peace. His eyes were full of love. I'll never forget the way he looked at me. It was as if he knew me, as if he had always known me. He reached out his hand. When I touched it, the fear and pain vanished. He said, "Do not be afraid. I am Jesus. I have come to save you, because I love you. Follow me, and I will give you life." In that moment, I felt a peace like nothing I'd ever known. The emptiness inside me was gone, replaced with something full and alive. I wanted to stay with him forever, but he said, "It's not your time yet. You have a purpose, Fahima. Tell others what you've seen. Share my love with them." And then, I woke up in the hospital. The doctors told me I had been in a coma for 3 weeks. They said it was a miracle I'd survived the explosion, given how severe my injuries were. But I knew this was more than a miracle. It was Jesus. At first, I kept quiet. I was afraid of what my family would think, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, the man in white, the peace in his eyes. So I started searching in secret. I read the Bible online. I watched videos about Jesus. And everything I read confirmed what I already knew deep inside. He was the truth I had been longing for. Eventually, I gave my life to Christ. It wasn't easy. My family was devastated. They couldn't understand why I would leave the faith I was raised in. I was rejected, isolated, but I clung to the promise Jesus made me, that I was not alone, and that my life had a purpose. Now, I tell my story to anyone who will listen, to those who feel lost, abandoned, hopeless, just like I once did. My scars remind me of the fire I survived, both outside and within. And every day I thank Jesus for his love, his mercy, and the new life he gave me. If you're listening to this and searching for the truth, know this. Jesus is waiting for you too. He loves you. He has a purpose for your life just like he had for mine. I was broken, hurting, and lost. But one thing was clear. I'd encountered Jesus and nothing in my life would ever be the same again. When I opened my eyes, it felt like waking up in a place I didn't recognize. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air, and the steady beeping of machines echoed around me. I could feel the heaviness of my body again, exhausted and weak, like I'd been carrying a weight for years. Pain pulsed through my skin. Breathing was difficult. Every part of me throbbed. But I was alive. At first, I couldn't figure out where I was. The harsh hospital lights disoriented me, and my blurred vision made it hard to recognize the faces leaning over me. One of them, a nurse, seemed shocked that I was awake. She leaned in, urgently calling out to someone outside the room. I couldn't make out what she said, but the look of relief on her face said it all. My thoughts were scattered, grasping for clarity. And then it hit me. The blast, the fire, the crushing darkness. Remembering that moment sent chills through me, but just as quickly another memory surfaced. The light, the man dressed in white, his words, his presence. I could still feel the warmth of his hand, the calm he brought me, the love that wrapped around me so completely. It felt more real than the pain in my body or the chaotic hum of the hospital room. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The man in white, Jesus, had rescued me. He pulled me from the fire, from the darkness, and gave me another chance at life. I whispered his name softly, not sure if I'd spoken it aloud or just in my mind. Jesus. The name felt unfamiliar on my tongue, but it brought me peace. Not long after, my family came rushing in. Their faces were a blend of joy and disbelief. My mother broke into tears, holding my hand like she never wanted to let go. My father stood at the edge of the bed, silent, his eyes filled with concern. My siblings gathered around, their voices overlapping in a blur of emotion. I could see how much pain they'd carried while I was unconscious. They told me I'd been in a coma for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of surgeries, treatments, and endless prayers. The doctors hadn't been hopeful. They'd warned my family I might not make it, and if I did, I might not recover. But here I was, awake, alive, because of him. I wanted to tell them everything, the fire, the darkness, the man in white, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain what I'd seen? How could I tell them that the Jesus we'd always been taught was just a prophet had saved me? I didn't know if they'd believe me, and honestly, I was afraid of what they might say. In the days that followed, my strength began to return. The doctors called my recovery unbelievable. They couldn't explain how I'd survived, much less how my body was healing so quickly. My burns were serious, but they were healing faster than expected. Every time someone used the word miracle, something stirred deep in my soul. I already knew the truth. This wasn't just luck, it was Jesus. Lying there in that hospital bed, I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said to me. Follow me, and I will give you life. Those words echoed louder with every passing day. I realized the life he had given me wasn't just about surviving, it was something deeper, something eternal. Late at night, when the room was still, I'd close my eyes and relive the moment. I could still see his face, still feel the warmth of his touch. The peace I had felt in his presence was unlike anything I had ever known, and I wanted to feel it again, so I started praying, not memorized lines, but honest, simple words. Jesus, if you're real, if you really saved me, show me what to do. One night as I lay awake, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet urging to know more about him. I asked a nurse if she could bring me something to read, and she came back with a Bible. At first I hesitated. A Bible was something I had been warned against, something forbidden in the faith I was raised in, but the moment I held it, I felt a peace I couldn't explain. When I opened it, my eyes landed on a verse that felt like it was written just for me. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Tears fell as I read those words. It was him. The same voice, the same love. And I knew in that moment, I couldn't ignore what had happened. Jesus hadn't just pulled me from the fire. He had saved my soul. He had given me a new beginning. And I couldn't stay silent about it. When I was finally discharged, I went home a changed person. My family saw it. They just didn't understand it. I tried to explain, but my words fell short, so I prayed that someday they would see what I had seen. Even now, as I speak these words, I remember what he told me. You have a purpose. I don't know exactly where this path will lead, but I know he's with me. No matter what lies ahead, I'll never forget the love that brought me back. These days, my life looks completely different. I wake up filled with gratitude, knowing I've been given another shot, a new hope, a new reason to live. It hasn't been easy, but the peace I've found in Jesus has carried me through every trial, every rejection, every step forward. After what happened, I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had before. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about the change inside me. I started to see the world differently. I wasn't living in fear anymore. For the first time, I felt truly alive. But choosing to follow Jesus came with a cost. My family, once my closest support, couldn't understand. When I shared what happened, I saw the disbelief in their eyes. They tried to explain it away, saying it was just a side effect of trauma or medication, but I knew it was real. And when I told them I had started reading the Bible and learning about Jesus, confusion turned to anger. My father, proud and devout, felt betrayed. He said I was turning my back on everything we believed. My mother begged me to stop, to return to the way things were. Seeing the hurt in their eyes was one of the hardest things I've ever faced. Some days, I felt completely alone. My siblings pulled away, friends stopped calling. I became a stranger in my own home, but even in those lonely moments, Jesus was with me. His promise, "I will never leave you nor forsake you," became my anchor. I held on to him, knowing he was my strength. I started searching for other believers. It wasn't easy. In a place where faith in Jesus is rare and often dangerous, finding community was difficult. But God led me to a small group of Christians who embraced me. They became my family. They encouraged me, prayed with me, and helped me grow. Through them, I learned more about Jesus, how he wasn't just a prophet, but the Son of God who came to rescue us. I learned about the cross, about grace, about forgiveness. And the more I learned, the more I fell in love with him. Today, my days have purpose. I start each morning in prayer and scripture. I've begun sharing my story. It's not always received well. Some still call me a traitor. Some accuse me of abandoning my roots. But I know what I saw, and I know who saved me. I can't stay silent. One of the most beautiful parts of this journey has been watching how God uses my story. I've seen people move to tears, touched by the hope and freedom Jesus offers. It's not about me. It's all about him, about what he's done for all of us. Life isn't perfect. I still face trials, doubts, pain. My relationship with my family is strained. Their disappointment weighs on me. But in all of it, I hold on to Jesus, his peace, his love, his promises. I've learned to trust him completely, in every hardship, every unknown. He's shown me again and again that his plans are good, even when I don't understand. And through it all, he's given me a joy nothing can take away. Looking back, I see how God was pursuing me all along, the emptiness, the searching, the restlessness in my soul. He was drawing me to him. And now, as I walk with him daily, I'm overwhelmed by his love. If you had told me years ago that I'd be here sharing this story, I would have laughed. But here I am, a living testimony of his power to save, heal, and transform. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds it, and that's enough for me. I pray every day for my family, and for others still searching, that they too would find what I found in Jesus, that God would keep using my story, not for my fame, but for his glory. So now I stand as someone who was once lost but is now found, once broken, now made whole, once searching, now resting in the greatest treasure of all. And with everything in me, I will follow him, because he's my Savior, my Lord, my everything.